Anyone in Motley Crue will tell you that hard rocking comes with a side order of hard partying, but even the other band members might find it difficult to top the sheer debauchery of bass player Nikki Sixx. The main songwriter of Motley Crue and a major troublemaker, Nikki Sixx is one of the first names that springs to mind when you think of pure rock and roll madness, although his act is considerably cleaner these days. The man born as Frank Carlton Serafino Feranna Jr. has spent a significant chunk of his life as the ultimate embodiment of the guy your parents warned you about. He has tried pretty much any rock star vice you can name, and has even written a book about his favorite one. Unfortunately for him, this kind of lifestyle is not all parties. As Sixx himself has told The Guardian, there's a price to pay, and at least one aspect for him was 15 years of nearly constant hangover, and that was just the surface stuff. This is tragic life, Nikki Sixx. The turbulent early years. Before he became Nikki Sixx, young Frank Feranna Jr. had quite a childhood, and it turned him into a hellraiser of an adult. Biography describes his childhood as fairly traumatic, as his father left the family shortly after he was born. Sixx was raised jointly by his grandparents and his mother, and had to move a lot in a span of 11 years. He attended 7 schools. This turbulence did not mold him into a particularly law-abiding young man. And when he was living with his grandparents in Jerome, Idaho, his school expelled him for selling drugs. This was the last straw for Grandpa and Grandma Sixx, who sent the young man to his mother in Seattle. Living with his mother was no picnic for Sixx, as it came with a side order of violent men. By the time he was 17, the budding musician finally had enough, so he left his past behind and took his bass, his new name, and his big dreams to Los Angeles. Still, his experiences as a young man have influenced Motley Crue's music. Sixx has said that the song Live Wire in particular is about domestic violence, and specifically mentions the assorted stepdads that used to beat him. The sexual assault story. The Independent reports the offending story features Nikki Sixx reminiscing about a party where a woman he knew pulled him into a closet, and they started having intercourse. Midway through the act, Sixx told the lady that he had to visit the bathroom, but instead of doing that and coming back like a normal person, he went to find drummer Tommy Lee. He told Lee to follow him to the closet, and when he gave the signal, they switched places. Sixx stood directly behind Lee, so according to him, the woman was still able to grab his hair and didn't notice a thing. Sixx then continued the party and forgot the incident, until the woman called him the following day and told him that she had been raped that night. Although she didn't name Sixx or Lee as the rapist, this had actually been a separate incident where a man had attacked her as she was trying to hitchhike home. This made the bassist realize he had gone too far. He had also essentially raped her. Consequence of Sound say Sixx has apologized for the damning story, though he says he doesn't recall the incident. He now says he believes he may have greatly embellished the events, or even made up the story during his less than sober interviews with writer Neil Strauss. His death from a heroin overdose. Nikki Sixx was a particularly enthusiastic drug user during the band's glory days, so he's had more than his share of close calls. Still, none of them can hold a candle to December 1987, the day he died. Ultimate Classic Rock says after a night of hard partying with some hard-rocking friends, including members of Guns N' Roses and Rat, the festivities were slowly winding down. However, Sixx decided to treat himself to one last hit of heroin before bedtime. This proved to be a fatal mistake because as soon as he was injected with the syringe, he passed out and started turning blue. Paramedics arrived to Slash vigorously thrashing in a hotel bathroom while his girlfriend Sally McLaughlin frantically administered mouth-to-mouth to Sixx. But for a while it looked like even the paramedics could do nothing to save the bassist. Sixx was loaded in an ambulance and given shots of adrenaline, but he was already dead, or so it seemed. Hours later, he unexpectedly awoke at a hospital, cursed at a cop trying to ask him questions, and wandered out wearing nothing but leather pants. He got a ride home from 2 fans who had just heard on the radio that he had died. His arrest in Japan. To illustrate how out of it Nikki Sixx was during the late 1980s, look no further than the train incident during Motley Crue's tour in Japan. Ultimate Classic Rock reports they took a bullet train from Tokyo to Osaka for a concert, But as it turned out, it was not a good idea to put the world's most dangerous rock band on the same train as mere mortals. During the return trip, Sixx was out of his mind while Mick Mars was busy swimming in a bottle of Jack Daniels. The two started to get on each other's nerves, and Sixx started throwing donuts at Mars. After a bit of that, the bassist decided to graduate to throwing bottles but misjudged the throw and hit a random man in the head. As the bloodied collateral damage was helped away, and authorities were contacted. When the train arrived in Tokyo, a couple of hundred cops were waiting in riot gear. They arrested Sixx and the band's manager, who both spent hours in jail as a local promoter tried to resolve the issue. Somehow he managed to persuade the police to release them, on the condition that Sixx write a letter of apology. Sixx refused initially, but he was released in the end, so someone must have caved. Regardless, the manager said, if it weren't for the valiant efforts of the promoter, they'd probably still be there. His darkest moment as a drug addict. During his worst heroin abuse years, Nikki Sixx had near-death experiences and went through pretty much all imaginable terrors that come with drug addiction. He doesn't consider any of his assorted dramatic drug-using incidents as his rock bottom. For Sixx, his absolute lowest point was a fairly uneventful and intimate moment that only registered as an absolute darkest hour because he finally realized the hopelessness of his situation. According to The Fix, the realization came when his dealer was temporarily out of stock and he had no access to heroin. The bassist spent a day and a half without heroin, in terrible, painful withdrawal that he likens to hell, before his dealer was able to come over and resupply his addiction. This incident made Sixx realize he couldn't get out, and that information hit him so hard that he describes the sensation as an almost physical feeling of being stuck. His disastrous relationship with Vanity. It's easy to assume that Nikki Sixx is always going to be the most debauched person in any given relationship. But as the Daily Beast describes, he once met his match in a pop star known as Vanity. She was a model, actress, and singer who was originally discovered, mentored, and dated by none other than Prince. By the time she met Sixx, her career was already dwindling. The two shared a mutual love and got engaged in 1987. This was not a good move, as both of them were extremely fond of rock star excesses and enabled each other's bad behavior. They would stay up all night freebasing, and in the morning Sixx would throw Vanity out because she started acting too crazy for him. Vanity eventually moved on from her famous fiancé who, as Hollywood Reporter notes, was ultimately just one link in a long chain of celebrity boyfriends that also included Adam Ant and Billy Idol. She continued her hard partying ways until 1994, when a massive overdose caused a renal failure that nearly killed her. After that, she abandoned her stage name and became a Christian evangelist under her real name, Denise Matthews. Unfortunately, her years of abuse had wrecked her health beyond repair, and she died at age 57 in 2016. Divorces and secret lives of ex-wives. A marriage to a young, restless Motley Crue member has all the stability and security of a one-legged porcelain statue at an elephant enclosure, and Nikki Sixx has the divorces to prove it. Although he's a dedicated family man these days, the bass man had to trudge through 2 failed marriages to get there. According to Blabbermouth, his second marriage to Donna D'Errico ended in 2007, and the divorce proceedings turned nasty when Sixx testified that he had discovered that she had previously been a stripper, and even done some high-end call girl work. This sordid past thoroughly freaked out noted Saint Nikki Sixx. D'Errico's lawyers, on the other hand, dismissed his claims as little more than an amusing attempt at character assassination. The fate of Brandy Brandt, the musician's first wife and the mother of 3 of his children, was less amusing. Biography says her 7-year marriage to Sixx ended in 1996, and perhaps not coincidentally, Sixx married D'Errico just 1 month later. Brandt's life then took a very dark and strange turn. The Sydney Morning Herald says the former Playboy cover girl became involved in a large cocaine smuggling conspiracy, and she was sentenced to several years in prison in 2014. His assorted petty feuds. Nikki Sixx has tons of opinions and a history of substance abuse issues, and he has carved out a career in a field full of people with similar temperaments and preferences. As such, Sixx seems to attract and cultivate feuds like a gardener might nurture fine flowers. According to Loudwire, the Motley Crue bassist has varying levels of beef with Michael Sweet of Stryper. Kiss as a band, Sixx feels they stole a crane trick from Motley Crue's final tour, and Gene Simmons in particular whenever their opinions clash. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, Sebastian Bach of Skid Row fame says he can't even keep up with all the feuds Sixx has going. The Crue bassist's most long-term target is none other than Metallica. According to Loaded Radio, the two bands have been at odds since they rose to dominate their respective metal scenes at the same time in the same general area, and Sixx has been known to take potshots at the band's drummer Lars Ulrich for his appearance, attitudes, and drumming ability. Of course, this could just be because Sixx likes to annoy drummers. After all, even his own percussionist isn't safe from his inflammatory antics. According to Metal Injection, Tommy Lee says Sixx unfollowed him on Twitter immediately after Motley Crue's final show.